but you got to find something more fair.
I took the time he played in, and I was measuring up against players he played against.
But that's
You're going to make the case for Chase Utley. He was playing in 2007 in Philadelphia in that park.
And I would use OPS Plus, which takes into account the run-scoring environment.
That.
You did that, but you did that for guys who played 2,000 games. You're setting the bar at the point where you will lose 20 first basemen.
Quick point on Rolen and Helton both, Brian. No matter what happens. And the reason why everyone should stay with us throughout the day of our programming is because we are headed for a decision on both Rolen and Helton that I believe will be in the single digits of votes, making it or not making it. Right. This, I believe, is going to be under 10 for both of them. This is going to be a historic election.
Close.
We've got two different players. Probably 10 votes or under.
Look, I'm just pushing back on you. If I'm in a room,
I'm trying to make peace there, but
I don't like. I don't like the specious logic. I just know if we're in a room and we're in a veterans committee, and you're like, BK, we need one more vote for Todd Helton. Of course, he's right there. Let me go to Mark Feinsand, who is my former nemesis, but maybe he can help me on this. Now, Mark, where are you as far as making the adjustment from Coors Field and in a very high run scoring environment?
Well, I looked at his adjusted OPS plus 133, which we mentioned. That would be higher than Tony Gwynn, Joe Morgan, Carl Yastrzemski, Wade Boggs, Rod Carew, all lock first ballot type Hall of Famers.
Those guys aren't playing first base, Mark. Hold on. Now, you got to go first baseman. You can't go Joe Morgan, who's stealing 70 bases at second base.
How about this? 6th highest batting average, 6th highest on-base percentage since the expansion era of any player. So I look at Helton's career.
But now you're not park adjusting.
I look at Helton's career.
But you got to park it. If you don't park adjust it, he's getting Denver.
Here's the thing, BK.
Denver is going to inflate it.
Coors Field is a major league ballpark. The games there count. That's where he played. I look at his numbers as a whole.
Yeah, but you need to put it in the proper context.
You do need to put it in proper context. Look, the 2000 game may be picking little nits in terms of trying to do it, but I think it shows the level of consistency this guy had and the level of excellence this guy had. Sorry, BK. I'm with Jason on this one.
Yeah. No, look, that's fine. I'm with Jason on this one, except by the way he got there. Steve, your thoughts on it? Because look, if you're looking at this, it's almost like looking at the original sabermetric point was a guy who hits 300 in 1930 is not like hitting 300 in 1968. The guy who hits 300 in 1968 is leading the league. The whole league hit 300 in 1930. So I'm just trying to put it in context. Give me something on Todd Helton, Steve.
Yeah. So I think Jason's logic was flawless and easy to follow. And I'm in complete agreement with it as well.
Thank you.
Here's the thing. The other thing is Todd Helton passes the gut check for me. He was one of the most feared guys. When he came to the plate against my teams, we were scared to death. He was absolutely going to come up with a big hit. He was going to drive the ball. He was phenomenal. And, oh, by the way, he was a great defender. He's a 3-time Gold Glove Award winner as well. And I'm with you. I think the road OPS matters. I think it matters. There are Hall of Famers who had lower road OPSs that we sort of take for granted because it's not Coors Field. And I think the Larry Walker candidacy is responsible for the big bump for Todd Helton. Now that we see Larry Walker, everybody's started to figure out where to put Coors Field. I think we've got a better understanding about Todd Helton. In my mind, he's absolutely a Hall of Famer.
You know what, and Steve, I think the most valid thing you said there that I no longer slam is it's the gut check, right? The eye test, whatever you want to call it. That's your inner computer at work, but it comes from a sophisticated kind of like your own internal algorithm. I used to slam that with the gut check, but I think there are things that are informing that. 20 years ago, I would have yelled at Steve for that, but now I won't. So yeah, of the Veterans Committee, that debate isn't over, but it is an official turning of the page. Bonds, Clemens, and Schilling took up a lot of psychological space in the voters' heads, and they also absorbed a lot of votes. Last year, Bonds and Clemens were near 65 and 66%, and Schilling, who was once higher, fell to 58%. Those three took in nearly 750 votes. Now, voters don't have to use all those votes this year. They can name 10, they can name 0. But it sure frees things up. Voters can now refocus their attention and give a fresh evaluation to a new crop of players. Scott Rolen, Todd Helton, and Billy Wagner are all up over 50%, and Andrew Jones is up over 40% of the vote. He needs 75% for induction. Rolen is the only one within normal striking distance. Mike Mussina went from 63 to 77% in year 6. The same year Rolen is in now. A jump from 50 to 75%, that usually doesn't happen. All 4 of those players I mentioned debuted during the PED logjam. Most were lucky to stay on the ballot. You need 5% of the vote to just stay on the ballot. Jim Edmonds, Bernie Williams, Kenny Lofton all fell below and were dropped. That doesn't make sense, but it happened. Scott Rowland debuted at 10%, got to 53% in 2021, reached 63% last year. He could make the leap to 75% in 1 year. Happens that way a lot. Todd Helton debuted at a more healthy 16.5%. He was at 52% in year 4 last year. Billy Wagner debuted at 10%. That's low. He was up to 51% last year, also moving up. And Andrew Jones debuted at 7%. That's close to the 5%. But he got to 41% in year 4 on the ballot last year. And it's the 10th and final year for Jeff Kent. Kent isn't a sabermetric darling, but he's the all-time home run leader at second base and was absolutely a peak impact performer. He's been around 32 or 33% the last 2 years, so it is very unlikely he makes a big run to 75%. That is historically too much ground to cover. But the field is open to a surge for Jeff Kent, who absolutely deserves a fresh look. I think it's very important for that particular group of players to make a big jump this year, to get in or at least get close. Because this year, Carlos Beltran makes his debut on the ballot. Beltran is a very strong candidate. He is likely, though, to take a pretty big hit for his part in the Astros sign-stealing scandal. He was a big part of that. So the players need to make that jump now, because Beltran might be hanging around for a little bit, and the ballot is about to get crowded again. Next year, a strong debut class. Adrian Beltre, Chase Utley, and Joe Mauer. I think all three are Hall of Famers. You also have David Wright, Matt Holliday, Adrian Gonzalez. I don't think they get in, but they certainly get some votes. In 2025, it's Ichiro and CC Sabathia, with a bunch of candidates just below who are pretty good. Dustin Pedroia, King Felix, and more. The point is, Beltran might stay on the ballot with some big classes coming. You can lose momentum in this voting. It happens a lot. And you only have 10 years. This is the year for Rowland, Helton, Wagner, and Jones to get in or get close enough for a final push. And back here live in the plaque gallery now. So will that be enough? Do you think, I said, a fresh evaluation, enough people to look at it and say, all right, now that I don't have to think about all those guys, let me think about that. Should Rowland or Helton get my vote? Do you think that happens?
I'm seeing good trends, generally speaking, but I'm also a little bit concerned that we as an electorate are not doing a good enough job of electing deserving candidates in a timely fashion. The timely fashion part is crucial. Billy Wagner should be a Hall of Famer tonight. He should be getting in tonight. If he's not, he has 2 more cracks at this. And he should not be on the ballot next year when we're competing with spots for the likes of Utley and Mauer and Beltre. We need to do a better job, Jason, of transitioning players into this Hall of Fame, into this great plaque gallery, so that way the next generation gets a fair hearing.
Right. Well, let me just say to that, it is supposed to be hard, and I understand that part. I agree with you in principle, but I do like the fact that it's hard. So I'm conflicted on this. What I'm fascinated by is, as Brian was saying, where these votes are coming from this year for all these big surges. And, you know, thanks to the Hall of Fame tracker that Ryan Thibodeau does, we can dig in on that. I can tell you that more than half of the new votes for Todd Helton have come from players who didn't have room for him last year. Their ballots were full.
Interesting.
Same for Wagner.
Yeah.
Same for Sheffield. Andrew Jones at 60%. Jeff Kent over 80% of his extra added votes coming from players who didn't, or voters who didn't have room last year. Scott Rowland, only 15%. You know why? He was already on those ballots. That's why you're seeing this great shifting in the percentages this year.
You bring up a good point, though, John, in that, and you're arguing with it and against it, Jason, but it's, are we doing a proper job of getting a representation from this era? Steve, why don't you start on that? Go back to Steve Phillips and Mark Feinstein. Steve, are we doing a good enough job? Because I know, again, if you look at the percentage of guys who are playing in the 1920s, a good lot of them are in the Hall of Fame. We start to think that nobody is good enough anymore to get into the Hall of Fame. Where are you on that?
Well, I think a lot of the numbers have been skewed a bit by the steroid era, because some of the great players also were tied to PEDs and therefore aren't getting in, so we look like we're underrepresented a little bit. But I think it's interesting because many of the candidates on the ballot this year have some issue right? There's something about him. So Roland's defense is a lot better than his offense was. And, you know, you look at Carlos Beltran's, he got the sign stealing scandal. Billy Wagner's only had 900 innings pitched in his career. And so everybody's got something that sells them, but something that you have to kind of get over and get a certain perspective on it. And I think the reason we're seeing a surge is that I think the writers are listening to each other. They're hearing people talk about why this guy is there, why this guy's not. And I think value is being recalculated as we speak from year to year, considering these players.
Steve, you lead me into something. Let me jump in before, Mark, you do. I think it's an excellent point. Not only were the PED guys not getting in, the PED guys' numbers made everybody else look anemic, right? Even Fred McGriff, 493 home runs, suddenly, it's not so great. Everyone's got 600 these days. So it kind of knocked guys back. Mark Feinsand voted for the PED guys. So, Mark, justify that. Like, it kind of did skew things for a number of years.
Well, it did, and, you know, it leaves me wondering about next year's ballot because for, you know, the last few years I've been saying, okay, I vote for Bonds, I vote for Clemens. Eventually they'll be off the ballot, and that'll open up some space for me to look at other guys. Helton and Wagner got on my ballot this year with those two spots. If nobody gets elected this year, well, only Jeff Kent's coming off, and I voted for Jeff Kent. So I have one spot open next year if I carry the other 9 over, and with Beltre and Mauer and Utley, all of a sudden there's 3 guys. So I'm going to have to now determine if I think those 3 guys all deserve votes, which 2 guys on my ballot deserve to get moved off. That's where maybe I will look at the PED situation and say, you know, I vote for Alex Rodriguez and Manny Ramirez. They're not getting in. Because even, you know, voters who voted for Bonds and Clemens, half of those voters didn't vote for A-Rod and Manny. So, you know, the crowded ballot is definitely an issue for voters.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Good. Well put. And I took a gratuitous shot at Mark, and he didn't bite, so I'll just back off.
I'm just used to it by now, BK.
That's it. No, I'm going to back off. You did the right thing. That was a smart thing to do. When we come back, again, we just went through this with the Veterans Committee. It's a matter of, do you have to justify bad behavior? That's what we were talking about. How about rewarding good behavior?